Welcome to the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. This is episode number 46. I'm Matt Baney, managing editor of the Tribune, and I'm joined today by Eric Barker, our outdoor and environmental editor. Eric, how's
Hello.
it going?
It's going well.
We're here to talk about a visit from Robert Kennedy Jr. That happened last week. He came to the area, went to the fish hatchery at Cherry Lane, and Eric was there to cover that. And it's interesting when someone like that comes here, and then he even made a little bit of news. So we'll get into that. But before we get started, just a reminder that the Tribune Podcast is available at lmtribune.com, on our YouTube page, and on all the podcast apps. So please be sure to like and subscribe, and we have a new episode each week. So Eric, RFK Jr. came. You were there to cover it. And why was he here last week?
Well, so he passed through Idaho last week, and of course was here to sort of promote his Make America Healthy Again agenda, much of which is focused on healthy foods. And that was sort of how he came to be at the Nez Perce Tribal Hatchery there on the Clearwater River at Cherry Lane.
And it occurs to me we should say, of course, just everybody should know this, but RFK Jr. is the Health and Human Services Secretary in the Trump administration.
Correct.
Which in that spot, not necessarily the sort of federal official we expect to show up at a fish hatchery.
Yeah, that's right. But there was a connection, and again, that's his promotion of natural foods. As you and the listeners may know, he's very much against, highly processed foods and food additives, food dyes, that sort of thing. And he talked about native diets of indigenous people being, of course, very highly concentrated on natural foods, game species, depending, where the particular tribe is from. It might be fish, it might be bison, say, and or berries or other things, and how that's much more processed than, or much more healthy than some of the stuff that we eat today. Mm-hmm. So that's what brought him there.
Okay. And yes, he was here, and anytime someone like that comes to the area, we're going to be there to cover it. And that's interesting. But then he actually sort of made some news when he was here. Tell us about that.
All right. So he said two things. While speaking about the importance of natural food and the connection that indigenous people have with natural food, he, unequivocally said the federal government's treatment of Native people is genocide. And he said that's a belief that he got from his father. His father called it the country's original sin. And his father, Robert F. Kennedy, I almost threw the junior in there, but Robert F. Kennedy, yes. Who may well have been president if he were not assassinated, again, called it the country's original sin, and thought, our sort of legacy of freedom and being a democracy, for a beacon for democracy, we would never sort of live up to that if we didn't come to terms with that original sin, the genocide of American Indians. And I think the way he phrased it, his father believed that because of, the movement of Native people onto reservations. And then RFK Jr. said that genocide continues today with food systems that make, he said, all Americans unhealthy, but it disproportionately affects Native Americans. He talked about some other tribes and how they call, the food system that the government provides, American food system, white death. And he was talking about, processed flours and processed fats and how it's, super unhealthy. But anyway, it was very un-Trumpian, on MAGA in my view, to hear a senior member of the cabinet talking about genocide. It just doesn't align with this administration's sort of anti-DEI agenda. And so that was the first bit of news. And, while he was talking about that, again, he kind of touched on the importance of salmon, a natural food source. And there were speakers within the tribe, officials at the tribe that spoke about that too, their importance and their reliance on salmon. And then he talked about his past work. So he, before I think he became a senator, he was an environmental attorney, and he talked about his work in the Columbia Basin to breach the Snake River dams, which was something I didn't expect to hear. And again, something that does not align with the Trump administration policies. And he, he didn't say, I still support dam breaching, but he, I think in his quote used the phrase something like, until that day happens, in the meantime, we need these hatcheries to provide fish for people. So it was, I did not expect it. I was surprised at those two aspects, the genocide and his, not only his past support for breaching, maybe that's not a surprise given his past work, but his willingness, to talk about it.
And it kind of shows, of course, he was a Democrat.
Yes.
And then ran for, and of course comes from perhaps the greatest Democratic dynasty family in the country, the Kennedys.
Yeah, we probably remove the perhaps. Definitely, I think.
Right. And ran for president as an independent, or was he a Democrat?
I can't recall. I think he might have started as a Democrat and then shifted to independent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he is sort of. I don't remember who it was. He's a round peg in a square hole, or square peg in a round hole in the Trump administration. He's he doesn't come from the conservative political philosophy like I think almost all the rest of them do.
It is interesting though that it does seem that perhaps sometimes when you're hired by an administration, you do kind of have to toe the party line, and
yeah,
and I think maybe people think, well, okay, he's fully MAGA now, fully Trump now. Obviously, he still has some beliefs that, as you say, don't line up with the administration.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to know if he received any pushback from the president or anybody else within the administration. Certainly, there was some pushback here in Idaho. There was some legislators took offense to his comments, or at least felt the need to counterbalance them with their own beliefs that the dams are very beneficial and not harmful to fish. So I think he visited on a Thursday of last week, and on Friday, the leadership of the Idaho Senate put out a statement saying, "Well, actually, don't forget that we love our dams here."
Interesting that it wasn't any lawmakers from north central Idaho. It was one from northern Idaho and one from southern Idaho. But anyway, yes,
that was interesting. And I wonder if it was just because it was organized in somewhat hastily.
Yeah.
In an effort to respond to current events.
Mm-hmm. So yes, those comments were made, and of course we took note of it. Very interesting. I given his spot in not really an environmental role in the administration.
Yeah.
I don't know. Would you expect there to be any sort of effect from his point of view in terms of policy in the administration?
No, I probably not. I don't think so. I mean, he's not the Secretary of Interior. He's not the Secretary of Commerce. I think those two positions have a lot more influence over salmon policy. But I think, I talked to Tribal Chairman Shannon Wheeler afterwards, and I think his view was like, listen, we're always happy to talk to people, and and we're happy to have at least somebody with the administration who knows us and kind of sees and hears what we're about and what we're trying to do with the salmon. And that can't be a bad thing. How influential it is, probably not super influential. I mean, we should note that President Trump spiked or canceled President Biden's agreement with the Nez Perce and other Columbia River tribes that, was supposed to bring up to $1 billion in funding for salmon recovery and for the tribes to develop renewable energy projects. The projects the tribes would develop would count towards replacement power if someday the dams are ever breached. And the money was going to pay for studies about how to replace the services of the dams, power, transportation, recreation, and so forth. So yeah, this administration ended that. They've scaled back on funding. The fiscal year 2026 budget, I think, is hasn't been approved yet, but it may well cut funding for the very hatcheries that provide the salmon and certainly for the restoration work.
Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned that RFK Jr. seemed pretty fascinated in the whole process at the hatchery. Did it seem like he was really kind of into it? And of course, we saw there was video of him holding a lamprey. And anyway, did he seem to enjoy his visit? It seemed
he did. It opened with a ceremony. There was a drum circle, and RFK Jr. participated in that. And I watched him closely, and of course, him not knowing the song of that particular drum circle, they played the tribe's flag song and then an honor song. But he did pretty well. Probably better than I would have done as far as keeping rhythm. And then, he toured the facility, and he seemed to be genuinely interested. He fed some juvenile spring Chinook that were in a raceway. He kind of climbed down into a raceway. He didn't get into the water, but there was a ladder going down into a raceway holding adult spring Chinook that will be spawned later this summer. And I mean, he didn't just look at them briefly. He seemed generally fascinated by them and almost moved by them. It was sort of interesting to witness. And then then they went over to the lamprey tank. The tribe has a lamprey project out at its hatchery there, and he and several other people with him held lamprey, and he was really fascinated by that. I think he really wanted one of those lamprey to latch on to his forearm. He kind of was, enticing it to do so, and they did, but I don't think they like gave him a hickey. They didn't latch on so hard that it would leave a mark. Yeah, I mean, and Kenny, I'll say he kind of had an intense aura about him. I mean, they didn't really want us interacting with him, but I don't know. He seemed there's something different about him.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, okay. Maybe beside the point. This might be a hot take. I think lamprey are gross.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on?
No,
lamprey?
they're a cool fish. I mean,
they look like, but with that mouth,
they have a scary looking mouth. Yeah. Out in the ocean, they attach themselves to other sea creatures and feed that way. But they're, they were important. They were an important food source for the tribe, but they're also a really important part of the ecosystem. As I think the late tribal elder Elmer Crow told me one time, everything eats lamprey, and they're so rich in nutrients, even as juveniles going out, that predators preferred them over juvenile salmon and steelhead. So they just by being another food source help protect salmon and steelhead.
Okay. Huh.
And while they're not protected, they're not listed, they are in trouble for sure. In the Columbia Basin, they really have a hard time climbing and negotiating the dams, which is strange because they can, climb sort of a vertical waterfall, a place like Willamette Falls, and but they really have a hard time with the angles and fish ladders and the velocity. But the tribe's doing a lot of work to bring them back.
Okay.
So yeah, get beyond their maybe interesting looking mug, their face, and embrace them.
Give them some respect.
Cool, they're a super cool critter.
Well, maybe if I got a hickey from one, I'd like him better or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else stood out about RFK's visit? Any other comments or anything that maybe kind of stuck with you?
Well, I think, and he talked about this a little bit, but clearly he's pretty knowledgeable, I think, more so than just the random person or the random government official about Native culture. And he said, when he traveled, when his family traveled, his dad, Robert F. Kennedy, no matter where they went, made a point of, visiting what he called, RFK Jr. called the local reservation. He talked about, he was given, a native name at one of the reservations. I can't remember which one, maybe Lakota. And he talked about, he was knowledgeable about the Nez Perce. He talked about Chief Joseph. And he said that Chief Joseph's very short surrender speech, in his mind, was one of the 4 most important speeches in American history, which was interesting. The others, by the way, were of course, the Gettysburg Address, a speech by John Winthrop, the Puritan, when I think they came ashore in New England in 1600s, maybe even before that. My history professors will probably throw shade at me for not remembering. The other was a speech by President Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex, and then Chief Joseph's speech. And absent from that, of course, was his uncle's speech, "Ask not what was it? Ask not what
your country can do for
you.
Ask what you can do for your country."
Thank you for saving me there.
Yeah. And hey, even JFK's speech about going to the moon, that's a famous one. I don't know if there's any RFK speeches that really stand out, but RFK.
Oh, sure. There's Martin Luther King, "I Have a Dream" speech. There's lots of speeches.
But Chief Joseph made the list over all of them, which very, very interesting.
The famous line is, "I will fight no more forever." And very concerned about his people at that point. And it's like, a paragraph or too long. It's very short.
Yeah. Well, interesting stuff, Eric. And, those assignments, of course, perhaps the main reason we go there is this is a person of name recognition. And is it your experience that generally when we go to those, not much newsworthy is said? Was this different in that he actually said some newsworthy things?
Yes, I think they're usually pretty scripted. The media covering it are they do their best to control the media. So yeah, I Deb Haaland visited. She was the Secretary of Interior under President Biden. Visited the Dorsack Hatchery, which is also run by the Nez Perce tribe, a few years ago. And, so that's newsworthy. But I think, the newsworthiness of this, again, was that RFK Jr. departed from the Trump party line and said things that we wouldn't expect from a member of the Trump administration.
And I wonder, he mentioned that he had been involved in some Columbia River lawsuits or legal actions. Do you remember any of him being involved in any of that?
No, I didn't recall that. He specifically mentioned Don Sampson, a former chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Reservation, called him his brother, and that immediately preceded his quote about, we worked for years to dismantle the Snake River dams. But yeah, I've covered it for a long time, and I don't remember his involvement. He said during his speech that he was one of the founding members of, what was the name of the tribal publication? Indian Times Today, I think. And when it started, it had a different name. I think he was involved in one of the environmental organizations, Riverkeepers, was sort of somehow attached to the founding of one of those organizations. So, and I kind of looked that up after the fact, but he, I don't recall him being an active, super active participant in Columbia Snake River issues.
Okay.
Over the last 25 years.
Of course, one of the other views he's well known for is vaccine hesitance. Did that come up at all?
It didn't. He kind of started to go into, the things that he gets criticized for, and it was in the quote we used, and I'll just read the quote. It said, when he was talking about genocide, he said, today against Native Americans, he said, today that genocide continues with a food system that is actually poisoning the tribes, poisoning all Americans, disproportionately with the tribes, which have the highest diabetes rates of any demographic in our country, the highest obesity rates, the shortest lifespan, cardiac disease, autoimmune disease, all of these diseases that were unknown even 20 years ago. Okay, well, I don't think there's a disease on that list that was unknown 20 years ago.
In 2005.
Right. So he kind of got into some of the stuff for which people think he's, kind of crazy. But he kept his comments much more focused on food and not so much on vaccines.
Okay. All right. Well, Eric, thank you.
You're welcome.
Interesting stuff. It was interesting coverage last week. And anyway, we don't get too many cabinet members that come this way. So always newsworthy when that happens. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. We'll be back again next week with another new episode. And until then, have a great day. Bye.